Welcome. Before we begin tonight's long and quiet journey through the history of an empire that lasted more than 1,000 years, I invite you to slow down, just a little. Let the weight of the day fall away, piece by piece. Feel your breath settle into its own gentle rhythm, steady and unhurried. There is no rush here, and nothing you need to hold on to. This time is yours, and the story we'll explore together is patient enough to wait for you. In a moment, we will travel back to a world that began as a cluster of huts on a few hills beside a river, a world that grew, quietly and steadily, into something far larger than anyone alive at the time could have imagined. It is not a story of heroes or glory, but of routines, roads, laws, families, and ordinary people who lived out their days while history slowly unfolded around them. As you listen, allow the calm repetition of events to wash over you. The rise and fall of emperors, the building of roads and walls, the passing of seasons, and the daily habits of people long gone, all of it forming a gentle, slow-moving current. There is nothing to memorize and nothing to follow closely. Just rest, breathe, and let the centuries drift by like soft waves on a quiet shore. When you're ready, we will begin our long walk through the Roman Empire. There is something strangely soothing about imagining the world before Rome existed, long before its emperors, its armies, and its endless stone roads. In the soft, muted landscapes of central Italy around the 10th century BCE, the land was not yet carved into provinces or dominated by marble walls. It was a place of rolling hills, thick forests, and scattered villages made of mud brick huts. Nothing at all suggested that this peaceful region would one day become the center of one of the largest empires in human history. The early inhabitants, mostly shepherds and farmers, lived calm and predictable lives. They woke before sunrise, tended to their animals, collected water, and grew barley or emmer wheat. Their world revolved around family, seasons, and survival. There were no ambitions of conquest or glory. The idea of ruling distant lands would have seemed almost humorous to them. Yet beneath this quiet simplicity, subtle changes were forming. Trade routes slowly developed along the Tiber River, allowing merchants to exchange salt, pottery, and small tools. A few nearby tribes, like the Latins and Sabines, interacted peacefully most of the time, sharing rituals and occasionally competing for fertile land. Every part of this world moved slowly, like a long exhale. And somewhere within this gentle setting, on a small hill called Palatine, the first seeds of an unimaginable empire were quietly taking root, unaware of the vastness of what was to come. The early Romans loved stories, especially stories that made the world feel older, larger, and full of mysterious order. Later generations would say that Rome began with a pair of abandoned twins, Romulus and Remus, who were rescued and nursed by a she-wolf. Whether anyone believed this literally did not matter. The tale gave the settlement a sense of destiny, a feeling that even the simplest village might be touched by something ancient and powerful. In reality, Rome began more slowly and far more quietly. Small clusters of huts on several hills gradually merged as families intermarried and exchanged goods. The hills offered natural protection, and the river made transportation easier. Over decades, wooden fences became small shrines, and temporary shelters turned into permanent hearths. The first Romans built in a very practical style: plain walls, straw roofs, clay floors. Nothing was grand or impressive, but everything served its purpose. The community depended on cooperation, shared rituals, and basic agreements about how to live together. Decisions were made in open-air gatherings, where elders discussed harvests, disputes, and seasonal festivals. These early customs would later evolve into the foundations of Roman law and government. But at this humble stage, Rome was simply a growing village trying to define itself. Each year, a few more families arrived. Each generation added a little more structure. And slowly, without any great declaration or dramatic event, the quiet settlement began to transform into something more organized, more confident, and more aware of its place in the world. As Rome expanded, it became clear that the community needed leadership, someone to coordinate rituals, manage disputes, and direct larger projects. This led to the era later known as the Roman Kingdom, a period ruled by 7 traditional kings. These kings were not emperors or legendary conquerors. Instead, they acted as caretakers of a still fragile society. Their responsibilities included maintaining peace, organizing religious ceremonies, and supervising construction of essential structures. The earliest known king, Romulus, was credited with forming the first political and military institutions, though much of his story blends myth and memory. Subsequent kings introduced more practical systems. Numa Pompilius, for example, focused on religion and social harmony, establishing priestly orders and seasonal observances that would influence Roman life for centuries. Another king, Tullus Hostilius, encouraged the development of early military discipline, though warfare remained small-scale and local. The most transformative was Tarquinius Priscus, believed to have begun major building projects such as drainage systems that helped control flooding on the marshy ground between the hills. Little of this early work was grand, but it was foundational. Streets became more defined, public spaces more organized, and wooden structures slowly gave way to sturdier materials. Most Romans of this era lived uneventful daily routines, cooking simple meals, weaving clothing, tending fields, but they could feel their town becoming something sturdier. Under steady, predictable kingship, Rome gained its first sense of collective identity, not as scattered families, but as a unified people. Life in early Rome moved at a gentle pace, marked by religious rituals, household tasks, and seasonal rhythms. Religion was everywhere, in the smoke rising from kitchen hearths, in small offerings placed at crossroads, and in quiet prayers whispered before planting seeds. The Romans believed that harmony came from pleasing countless household and community spirits, so they observed rituals with calm, repetitive precision. These traditions also created a shared cultural structure. Festivals marked the turning of seasons and the passing of years, bringing together families from across the hills. Markets formed on designated days, allowing farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen to exchange goods. Over time, various professional groups, smiths, potters, carpenters, organized themselves into early guilds that maintained standards and protected their trades. The city's layout evolved slowly. Dirt paths became smoother, communal wells multiplied, and simple gathering spaces emerged. The Romans valued practicality above beauty. Even their earliest temples were modest wooden buildings intended more for function than splendor. Houses remained small, often with a single room, but they were built close together, encouraging social ties and shared responsibilities. Disputes were resolved by elders or by early laws that emphasized fairness and tradition. Although the kingdom period is often overshadowed by later achievements, it was here that the Roman mindset was forged, disciplined, orderly, and quietly determined. Every small improvement, each stone placed, each rule agreed upon, pulled the community a little further away from its village origins, preparing it for a far more ambitious future. As the decades passed, Rome's kings became more powerful, and some began to rule with less patience and more ambition. Public projects continued, including temples, meeting halls, and the early forms of city walls, giving Rome a sturdier and more organized appearance. Yet everyday life for most Romans remained simple. Farmers still rose before dawn to work their fields. Craftsmen continued shaping tools and pottery, and families gathered for small meals of porridge, bread and olives. Beneath this calm surface, however, tension grew. Some kings demanded heavier labor for public works, while others interfered too aggressively in religious or political affairs. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, became known for his harsh rule and disregard for tradition. His growing arrogance created frustration among noble families and ordinary citizens alike, who felt their customs and rights were being overshadowed by a ruler who placed himself above the community. The breaking point came with a scandal involving the king's family, an event that shook public trust and sparked collective anger. What followed was not a dramatic uprising but a slow, determined refusal to accept monarchical authority. The people of Rome, shaped by generations of shared customs and cooperative decision-making, realized they no longer needed a king. In a quiet but profound shift, they removed Tarquin from power and vowed never again to allow a single ruler to dominate their city. This moment marked the end of the kingdom and the beginning of something entirely new, the Roman Republic. When the Roman kingdom dissolved, there was no grand ceremony declaring a new world. Instead, the transition happened with the same slow steadiness that defined early Roman life. The people, weary of kings, decided to replace monarchy with a system that better reflected their communal spirit. Thus emerged the Roman Republic, a structure built on shared authority and careful balance. Two elected officials, the consuls, replaced the king. They served for only 1 year, making it impossible for any single man to become too powerful. Supporting them was the Senate, a council of elders who advised, debated, and maintained traditions. Their meetings were calm affairs, full of slow deliberation rather than fiery speeches. Laws were shaped gradually, often emerging from long discussions held in open forums where citizens gathered to observe. Daily life remained steady and familiar. Farmers still tended fields, craftsmen still shaped metal and clay, and families still followed ritual routines. But beneath these ordinary patterns, something profound was forming. The Republic encouraged a sense of participation, even among those who had little direct influence. People began to feel that Rome belonged to them collectively, not to a single ruler. This shared identity created a stronger, more unified community. The Republic's early decades were not marked by dramatic victories or sweeping reforms, but by the quiet refinement of structure and law. Rome, still small and modest, had found a new rhythm, one that would ultimately allow it to expand far beyond anything its early founders could have imagined. The early Republic's strength came not from armies or wealth, but from routine. Romans developed a way of life centered on discipline, predictability, and a deep respect for shared rules. Even small tasks were approached with seriousness. Farmers continued to work methodically, measuring planting seasons with careful attention. Craftsmen improved their techniques little by little, ensuring their tools, pottery, and household items became more reliable. Slowly, a network of dirt paths grew into more organized routes. These early roads were not yet the stone marvels that would later span the empire, but they connected nearby villages and facilitated trade. Merchants carried olive oil, wool, and grain along these routes, strengthening economic ties. The expanding network also allowed for faster communication during times of dispute or danger. Meanwhile, Roman families maintained structured household routines. The father, or paterfamilias, oversaw family decisions with calm authority. Meals were simple and often eaten at the same times each day, giving rhythm to domestic life. Children learned by observing. how to manage livestock, repair tools, and participate in religious ceremonies. Religion continued to permeate everything. Festivals, offerings, and seasonal rituals maintained social order and reinforced community bonds. The Republic fostered a mindset that valued practicality above luxury, duty above comfort. And although Rome was still small, its citizens carried themselves with an unusual sense of purpose. It was this quiet culture of discipline that would later fuel Rome's astonishing expansion. As Rome grew, it inevitably encountered friction with neighboring communities. These early conflicts were small and unspectacular, short skirmishes over fields, water sources, or border boundaries. Yet each encounter subtly shaped Roman society. Military service became a duty shared by ordinary citizens rather than a privilege of elites. Every able-bodied man contributed, not for glory, but because the survival of the community demanded it. Training was simple, equipment basic, but the discipline Romans practiced in their daily lives translated easily into military organization. Soldiers marched in orderly lines, responded quickly to commands, and adapted to new challenges with a calm steadiness uncommon in tribal warfare. Victories were modest, usually securing a patch of land or defending a threatened hill. But every success strengthened Rome's confidence and reputation. More tribes began to take notice, some seeking alliances, others preparing for confrontation. Despite the rising tension, Rome did not yet see itself as a conquering power. Its ambitions remained local, focused on protecting farmland and ensuring stable trade. But each small conflict expanded Roman influence a little farther, drawing new communities into its orbit. These early expansions happened gradually, almost unintentionally, like a slow tide creeping outward. By the end of this period, Rome controlled more territory than ever before, not through grand campaigns, but through persistent, methodical effort. The city was no longer a quiet settlement. It was becoming a regional force. As Rome expanded externally, tensions grew internally. Roman society was divided into two major groups: the patricians, who held political power and controlled much of the wealth, and the plebeians, the everyday citizens who farmed, crafted, and served in the military. For years, plebeians felt underrepresented and vulnerable, especially during times of debt or crop failure. Their frustration increased as they contributed heavily to Rome's defense, but had limited influence over its laws. This growing resentment led to one of the earliest social struggles, the conflict of the orders. Unlike dramatic revolutions in other civilizations, this was a slow, persistent negotiation. There were peaceful protests, withdrawals from military service, and long debates in public forums. Over decades, the plebeians gradually secured political rights, including the ability to elect their own representatives, the tribunes, who held the power to veto unfair decisions. Laws became more transparent when the 12 tables were written, providing a clear reference for legal disputes. Life for ordinary Romans improved, not through sudden upheaval, but through steady compromise. The conflict left a lasting mark on the Republic. It created a more balanced political structure and strengthened Rome's unity at a crucial stage. The city emerged from the struggle more resilient and more cohesive, ready for the far greater challenges that lay ahead. With social tensions easing and political institutions solidifying, the Roman Republic entered a period of growing stability. Government roles became more defined, with checks and balances that prevented any single person from dominating. The Senate gained considerable influence, guiding decisions about war, trade, and diplomacy. Consuls oversaw military and administrative matters, while various magistrates managed finances, public order, and festivals. This complex system might seem slow and cumbersome, but Romans valued process over speed. They preferred lengthy debates to rash decisions, believing that careful discussion preserved tradition and stability. Meanwhile, the city itself continued to grow. More families settled on Rome's hills, and small workshops multiplied. Temples became sturdier, built from stone rather than wood. The Forum, the heart of public life, bustled with activity as merchants set up stalls and citizens gathered to hear announcements. At the same time, Roman identity became more distinct. A sense of shared purpose and destiny quietly strengthened the community. People believed that their disciplined way of life made them uniquely suited to endure hardship and succeed in difficult tasks. This confidence prepared Rome for its next phase, one that would transform it from a regional power into a force capable of shaping the Mediterranean world. But for now, the Republic remained grounded in routine, law, and tradition, building the foundations of an empire still far in the future. As Rome's influence reached farther into central Italy, conflict with neighboring peoples intensified. The Latins, Sabines, Etruscans, and Samnites each posed distinct challenges, and the Republic found itself engaged in nearly continuous warfare. Yet these wars, though frequent, remained practical and methodical rather than glorious. Romans fought because they believed security required vigilance. Military service was still a citizen obligation, with soldiers leaving their farms each spring and returning after harvest. Each campaign followed similar patterns, marching to contested territories, constructing temporary camps, and engaging in organized battles. Equipment improved slowly. Shields became sturdier, spears more standardized, and formations more disciplined. The Samnite Wars were among the most defining, pushing Rome to adapt its tactics and refine its logistical systems. These conflicts taught Romans how to maneuver in rough terrain, coordinate large forces, and maintain supply lines. Victories were rarely decisive, but they increased Rome's territorial control and secured key trade routes. Each war ended with new treaties, alliances, or settlements that strengthened the Republic's regional presence. Despite the constant military obligations, daily life for civilians remained steady. Fields were tended, markets held, and households maintained their routines. Rome's ability to wage prolonged wars while sustaining ordinary life at home became one of its greatest advantages. By the end of these early conflicts, Rome controlled much of central Italy. The Republic had matured into a formidable regional power, guided by discipline, persistence, and a quiet belief in its own durability. With territorial expansion came the need for better communication, transportation, and resource distribution. Romans responded with one of their most enduring achievements: infrastructure. Early roads, which began as simple dirt paths, evolved into well-planned routes connecting towns across central Italy. Engineers studied terrain carefully, choosing straight lines whenever possible. Layers of gravel and stone were added to create durable surfaces that resisted erosion. These roads allowed soldiers to move swiftly and merchants to transport goods more efficiently. Bridges, aqueducts, and drainage systems followed, each built with methodical precision. The Cloaca Maxima, an early sewer system, helped dry the marshy land around the Forum, making the city healthier and more stable. Aqueducts carried fresh water from distant hills, improving sanitation and supporting population growth. Public buildings, including temples, basilicas, and markets became more sophisticated. Stone replaced wood, and architectural techniques advanced. Yet even at this stage, Roman design favored function over decoration. Structures were meant to endure, not impress. Ordinary citizens benefited enormously from these improvements. Access to clean water reduced disease, and reliable roads made travel safer. Infrastructure bound the expanding republic together, creating a sense of cohesion across diverse communities. Slowly, Rome was becoming more than a city. It was turning into a connected system, a network of people and places moving in quiet harmony. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had grown confident and orderly. Its political structure was stable, its military disciplined, and its infrastructure extensive. But beyond Italy lay a complex and volatile Mediterranean world filled with powerful kingdoms, wealthy trading centers, and rising naval powers. Among them, Carthage stood out as the most formidable. Located in North Africa, Carthage controlled vast trade networks and possessed one of the largest navies of the ancient world. For years, Rome and Carthage coexisted peacefully, each focused on its own interests. But as Roman influence crept closer to the sea, especially towards Sicily, the two powers found themselves on an unavoidable collision course. Still, at this moment, most Romans lived quietly, unaware of the brewing conflict. Farmers tended vineyards and olive groves. Merchants transported pottery, grain, and wine, and families honored their household gods. Life felt steady and familiar. Yet political debates in the Senate hinted at growing concerns. Rome had never fought a large-scale naval war, while Carthage excelled at maritime dominance. The slightest disruption in Sicily could ignite a struggle far more intense than any Rome had yet experienced. The Republic was on the edge of a profound turning point, though few recognized it. The calm of daily life masked the growing tension that would soon explode into one of the most defining conflicts in ancient history. The First Punic War erupted over a seemingly minor dispute in Sicily, but the consequences were anything but small. Rome suddenly found itself in a naval war despite having little maritime experience. To compensate, the Republic embarked on an ambitious shipbuilding initiative. Roman engineers studied captured Carthaginian vessels with meticulous care, replicating their designs with remarkable speed. The result was a fleet of sturdy warships equipped with a unique innovation: the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to turn naval battles into infantry engagements. At sea, Roman crews were inexperienced, but their discipline and determination compensated for their lack of skill. Battles were slow, grinding affairs, full of deliberate maneuvers rather than elegant tactics. Victories came through persistence and the ability to adapt. Meanwhile, life in Rome continued with minimal interruption. Citizens attended markets, festivals, and public assemblies as usual. Women managed households and finances while men served long terms at sea. Letters returned sporadically, describing cramped ships, unpredictable weather, and the unfamiliar challenges of naval warfare. The war dragged on for more than 2 decades, exhausting both sides. Carthage relied heavily on experienced sailors and wealthy merchants. Rome relied on sheer endurance. When the conflict finally ended, Rome emerged victorious, gaining Sicily as its first overseas province. The Republic had crossed a threshold. It was no longer a regional power, but a rising Mediterranean force. With Sicily under its control, Rome faced a new challenge: administering foreign territories. This required systems far more complex than anything used within Italy. Governors were appointed to oversee provinces, collect taxes, and maintain order. These officials were expected to act with caution and fairness, though some succumbed to greed and corruption. The Senate developed new guidelines, slowly standardizing provincial administration. Despite these bureaucratic changes, most Romans experienced little immediate impact. Farmers continued their routines, craftsmen maintained steady production, and merchants expanded their trade networks. Yet subtle shifts were beginning. Wealth from Sicily, grain, taxes, and trade profits flowed into Rome, enriching certain families. Economic disparities widened, and debates about fairness grew louder. Still, the Republic adapted with characteristic patience. Roads and communication routes extended toward the new province, and Roman law gradually reached beyond the Italian peninsula. Cultural exchanges also increased. Roman soldiers returning from Sicily brought stories of Greek theaters, new foods, and different customs. Although Rome remained proud of its own traditions, exposure to foreign ideas quietly influenced architecture, art, and daily life. Sicily marked the beginning of a new identity for Rome, not merely a city surrounded by allied communities, but a growing empire with distant lands and diverse peoples. The Republic was evolving, slowly but unmistakably. Though defeated in the First Punic War, Carthage did not disappear. Instead, it rebuilt its strength under the leadership of talented generals, most notably Hamilcar Barca. His family, driven by determination to restore Carthaginian power, focused on expanding influence in Spain. This region, rich in silver mines and strategic locations, offered resources necessary to challenge Rome once again. Meanwhile, Romans watched Carthage's activities with increasing concern. The Senate debated quietly, evaluating reports from diplomats and traders. They recognized that Carthage's growing presence in Spain could spark future conflict, but they hesitated to act prematurely. Ordinary Roman citizens remained largely unaware of the geopolitical tension. Life continued at its measured pace. Fields were cultivated, public games held, and markets filled with imported goods. Yet beneath this calm, Rome's leadership understood that another war was likely. Hamilcar's son, Hannibal, grew up immersed in military culture, shaped by stories of Carthage's defeat and sworn to avenge it. His rise would eventually alter the destiny of both civilizations. For now, however, the Mediterranean remained deceptively peaceful. Rome strengthened its alliances, maintained its fleet, and kept a cautious eye on the West. The stage was quietly being set for a conflict far more dramatic than the first, one that would test the Republic's endurance as never before. The Second Punic War began not through a grand declaration, but through a calculated move in Spain. Hannibal, now commander of Carthaginian forces, attacked the city of Saguntum, a Roman ally. Rome demanded his withdrawal. Hannibal refused. The Senate responded with reluctant yet firm resolve. War was declared. What followed became one of the most remarkable military campaigns in ancient history. Hannibal led his army, including war elephants, across the Alps, a feat both dangerous and astonishing. The journey was slow, grueling, and filled with harsh conditions. Many soldiers and animals perished. Yet the army that emerged into Italy, though diminished, was formidable. Rome was caught off guard. Battles at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae delivered devastating Roman losses. Entire legions were annihilated, and panic spread through the Italian countryside. Still, Rome did not collapse. Its resilience came from its deep-rooted discipline and ability to replenish its armies. While citizens feared the worst, they continued tending fields, repairing homes, and maintaining communal rituals. Daily life persisted even as war raged nearby. The Senate refused to negotiate, choosing endurance over surrender. Hannibal roamed Italy for years, unable to break Rome's will. The Republic's stability, built over centuries, prevented internal collapse. Eventually, Roman forces under Scipio Africanus took the war to Carthage, forcing Hannibal to return home. Rome triumphed once more, emerging stronger and more confident than ever. Rome's victory in the Second Punic War brought relief, but also profound consequences. Carthage was weakened, its territories restricted, and its economy heavily burdened by war indemnities. Rome, meanwhile, gained new lands in Spain and increased influence across the Mediterranean. Yet victory carried hidden costs. Decades of warfare had strained Roman society. Countless farms were abandoned or destroyed, leaving families in debt or poverty. Many soldiers returned home to find their land neglected, overtaken by weeds, or purchased cheaply by wealthy elites. Large estates controlled by aristocrats expanded, worked by slaves captured during the wars. This shift disrupted traditional Roman life. Small farmers, once the backbone of the Republic, struggled to recover. Economic inequality grew, planting the seeds of future unrest. Still, Rome celebrated stability. Temples were built to honor victory, public games held to lift spirits, and officials oversaw the reconstruction of damaged towns. Roads and infrastructure continued to expand, connecting new territories more tightly to the capital. Despite underlying tensions, the Republic pushed forward with its characteristic determination. The Mediterranean was becoming increasingly Roman, and the city itself swelled with wealth, goods, and people from distant lands. Yet beneath the triumph, a quiet imbalance was developing, one that would eventually threaten the stability of the Republic. As Rome's influence spread, so too did its cultural connections. Greek colonies in southern Italy and conquered territories exposed Romans to new ideas, philosophy, art, literature, and architecture. Greek tutors became common in wealthy households, teaching children language, mathematics, and rhetoric. Sculptures and pottery imported from Greece decorated Roman homes, and public buildings adopted Greek columns and designs. Still, Romans remained proud of their own traditions. They blended Greek sophistication with their own practicality, creating a unique hybrid culture. Religion also evolved. Roman gods were increasingly identified with Greek counterparts, Jupiter with Zeus, Mars with Ares, though rituals remained distinctly Roman. Public festivals grew grander, drawing larger crowds. In daily life, the city grew busier. Markets offered spices, textiles, and metals from across the Mediterranean. Foreign merchants walked alongside Roman farmers and craftsmen. The population increased as freedmen, slaves, and newcomers settled in Rome. This cosmopolitan atmosphere brought diversity, but also new challenges. The Senate struggled to manage the complexities of governing distant provinces, maintaining roads, and addressing economic disparities. Yet most citizens continued with their routines, adjusting quietly to the evolving world. Rome was transforming from a regional power into a cultural and political giant, absorbing influences while shaping the Mediterranean in its image. With Rome's military responsibilities increasing, generals gained significant influence. Successful commanders won not only battles, but also wealth, loyal soldiers, and political power. Figures like Scipio Africanus became household names, admired for their victories and respected for their leadership. This growing prestige, however, introduced new tensions into the Republic's political system. Generals controlled armies far from Rome, making them difficult for the Senate to supervise. Soldiers often felt stronger loyalty to their commander than to the state, especially when promised land or rewards after campaigns. Meanwhile, wealthy elites in Rome consolidated land and influence, widening the gap between rich and poor. Political offices became stepping stones for ambitious individuals seeking glory rather than service. Despite these changes, daily life for ordinary Romans continued much as before. They attended baths, markets, and festivals. They worked in fields or workshops and honored household rituals. Yet the political atmosphere was shifting. Public debates grew sharper, and rival factions emerged within the Senate. The Republic was slowly moving toward a period of internal strain. For now, it remained stable, but the balance between tradition and ambition was becoming increasingly delicate. Rome's greatest strength, its disciplined expansion, was beginning to reveal hidden vulnerabilities. Economic inequality had grown steadily since the Punic Wars, and by the 2nd century BCE, the divide between wealthy elites and ordinary citizens had become impossible to ignore. Land owned by small farmers had increasingly fallen into the hands of large estate owners, leaving many families struggling to survive. Into this tense environment stepped Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, brothers determined to restore economic balance. They proposed reforms to redistribute public land to poorer citizens, aiming to revive the class of small farmers who were essential to Rome's stability. Their ideas gained significant support among the plebeians, but provoked fierce resistance from the Senate, which viewed the reforms as a threat to its authority and wealth. The struggle turned bitter. Tiberius, and later Gaius, faced intense political opposition and ultimately met violent deaths. Their reforms were only partially implemented, leaving many problems unresolved. Yet their efforts exposed deep fractures within Roman society. The Republic, once united by discipline and shared identity, was now divided by competing interests. The Gracchi's legacy was a warning of growing instability. The quiet routines of daily life continued, but beneath the steady rhythm, Rome's political foundations were beginning to tremble. In the aftermath of the Gracchi, Rome entered a period of increasing tension. Political factions hardened, with senators and popular leaders clashing over reforms, military commands, and control of public resources. Debates that once unfolded calmly became charged with emotion and rivalry. Meanwhile, external conflicts persisted. Rome fought wars in Numidia, Greece, and Asia Minor, each requiring significant troop deployments. Generals such as Marius and Sulla rose to prominence, each introducing reforms that shifted military and political power. Marius reorganized the army, allowing landless citizens to enlist. This change strengthened Rome's military capacity, but also deepened soldiers' loyalty to their commanders rather than the state. Sulla, facing political opposition, marched his army on Rome, a shocking and unprecedented act. Though he later relinquished power, the precedent had been set. Daily life for ordinary Romans remained surprisingly normal. People shopped in markets, attended public baths, and participated in local festivals. Yet they could not ignore the growing uncertainty. Rumors of military confrontations and political purges spread quietly through taverns and forums. The Republic was still functioning, but its once stable system was becoming increasingly fragile, strained by ambition, inequality, and the pressures of a rapidly expanding empire. Amid Rome's political turbulence emerged Julius Caesar, a charismatic and ambitious figure whose rise would reshape history. Born into a noble family but lacking great wealth, Caesar advanced through Rome's political ranks with determination. He was an excellent speaker, skilled negotiator, and adept at forming alliances. His partnership with Pompey and Crassus, known as the First Triumvirate, allowed him to secure the governorship of Gaul, where he commanded legions for nearly a decade. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul expanded Roman territory dramatically. His reports to Rome, written in clear and calm prose, described battles, geography, and diplomacy in ways that captivated the public. Soldiers adored him for his leadership and fairness, while ordinary citizens admired his generosity and boldness. His growing power, however, alarmed many senators who feared he might undermine the Republic. When his governorship ended, they demanded he return to Rome without his army, a command he refused. Crossing the Rubicon River with his legions, Caesar initiated a civil war. Yet throughout this turmoil, Rome's everyday rhythms persisted. Markets opened each morning, craftsmen worked diligently, and families carried on their routines. The Republic stood at a crossroads, its future uncertain, as Caesar moved steadily toward ultimate authority. The conflict between Caesar and Pompey plunged Rome into civil war. Their armies clashed across Italy, Greece, and Egypt. Pompey, once the most powerful man in Rome, was ultimately defeated and killed. Caesar returned to the capital as the undisputed leader of the Roman world. Yet he did not rush to declare himself king. Instead, he introduced reforms aimed at stabilizing society, addressing debt, and reorganizing provincial administration. He expanded the Senate, revised the calendar, and initiated public works to reduce unemployment. Many citizens appreciated these changes, especially those who struggled economically. However, Caesar's accumulation of power unsettled members of the Senate. They feared that Rome, which had rejected kings centuries earlier, was once again slipping under the control of a singular ruler. Concerns grew silently, whispered in corridors and private gatherings. Ultimately, a group of senators, believing they were protecting the Republic, assassinated Caesar on the Ides of March. The act shocked Rome, but did not restore stability. Instead, it sparked further conflict. Streets filled with confused citizens, torn between admiration for Caesar and loyalty to Republican traditions. The Republic, already weakened by decades of strain, began to crumble. Rome was entering a new era, one shaped not by shared governance, but by the struggle for supreme authority. After Caesar's death, Rome was thrown into uncertainty. His supporters rallied around his adopted heir, Octavian, a young and seemingly inexperienced figure who would soon prove remarkably capable. Forming an alliance with Mark Antony and Lepidus, Octavian pursued the conspirators who had assassinated Caesar. The resulting conflict culminated in the Battle of Philippi, where Caesar's killers were defeated. Yet harmony within the triumvirate was short-lived. Tensions grew between Octavian and Antony, especially as Antony formed a political and personal alliance with Cleopatra in Egypt. Romans worried that Antony's loyalty was shifting toward a foreign queen. Octavian skillfully used this concern to strengthen his own position, presenting himself as the defender of Roman values. Meanwhile, everyday life continued. Citizens attended the theater, visited bathhouses, and made offerings at temples. Markets were busy with goods from across the Mediterranean. But the political atmosphere remained tense, overshadowed by the rivalry between Rome's two most powerful men. Octavian prepared carefully, building support among senators, soldiers, and ordinary citizens. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would determine the future of the Roman world. The conflict between Octavian and Antony escalated into open war. Their forces met at the Battle of Actium, a naval engagement off the coast of Greece. Antony, supported by Cleopatra's fleet, struggled against Octavian's disciplined navy. The battle unfolded slowly, with ships maneuvering cautiously, avoiding reckless actions. Eventually, Antony and Cleopatra fled, leaving their fleet in disarray. Their remaining forces collapsed soon after. Octavian pursued them to Egypt, where both eventually took their own lives rather than face capture. With their deaths, resistance to Octavian ended. Rome breathed a quiet sigh of relief. After decades of civil war, the prospect of stability returned. Octavian reorganized territories, secured Egypt as a Roman province, and returned to Rome as the undisputed leader. He did not claim the title of king. Instead, he presented himself as the first citizen, careful to honor republican traditions even as he effectively ruled as monarch. The Senate granted him the title Augustus, marking the beginning of the Roman Empire. Ordinary Romans welcomed the calm. Markets flourished, public buildings were restored, and festivals celebrated renewed peace. Rome had entered a new era, one defined by centralized authority, cultural prosperity, and relative stability. Augustus ushered in the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted more than 2 centuries. He reformed the army, established a standing force loyal to the state rather than individual commanders, and created the Praetorian Guard for protection. Infrastructure expanded dramatically. Roads, bridges, and aqueducts improved communication and quality of life across the empire. Provinces were governed more effectively, with increased oversight ensuring fairness and reducing corruption. Trade flourished as merchants transported goods along secure routes. Spices from the east, grain from Egypt, wool from Spain, and glass from Syria filled Roman markets. Cultural life blossomed. Poets such as Virgil, Horace, and Ovid wrote works that shaped Roman identity for generations. Architecture advanced with marble temples, theaters, and public baths. Meanwhile, everyday life remained predictable. Families continued their domestic routines. Children learned reading and arithmetic, and citizens participated in festivals honoring gods and emperors. The empire grew quietly and steadily. Augustus maintained his authority with caution and subtlety, avoiding overt displays of power. His leadership established a model that later emperors would follow, though not always successfully. Rome was now more than a city. It was a vast and interconnected world, unified by law, language, and shared infrastructure. Daily life during the early empire varied widely across regions, yet shared common rhythms. In Rome, mornings began with bustling markets where vendors sold bread, olives, and fruit. Craftsmen opened workshops, producing pottery, tools, and clothing. Senators walked to the forum for discussions, while teachers instructed children in small schools. Public baths served as social centers where people bathed, exercised, and exchanged news. In rural provinces, farmers rose before sunrise to tend fields and livestock. Villages were quiet, marked by routines passed down through generations. Roman influence appeared in architecture, roads, and administrative systems, but local customs persisted. Cities such as Alexandria, Antioch, and Carthage became hubs of trade, culture, and learning. The empire's diverse population included Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, Gauls, Syrians, Jews, and many others. Despite differences, Roman law and infrastructure provided a unifying framework. Temples, theaters, and government buildings reflected shared cultural markers. Military presence ensured order, with legions stationed along frontiers to deter threats. Though distant from Rome, provincial life followed similar patterns of discipline, routine, and community. The empire functioned like a vast machine, complex yet remarkably stable. Most citizens experienced a sense of predictability rarely matched in ancient history. Following Augustus, Tiberius inherited an empire in strong condition. Though capable and experienced, he ruled cautiously, preferring quiet management to grand reforms. Rome remained stable under his leadership, but his growing suspicion of political rivals led him to withdraw from public life, governing remotely from the island of Capri. This distance allowed ambitious officials to exploit their positions, creating tension in the capital. After Tiberius, Caligula ascended to power. His reign began with promise, but soon became marked by erratic behavior, extravagant spending, and unpredictable decisions. Rumors of instability spread through Rome, causing unease among citizens and senators alike. Despite the dramatic stories later told about Caligula, daily life for most Romans remained unchanged. They continued visiting baths, attending plays, and managing farms. Imperial turmoil rarely disrupted ordinary routines unless it affected taxation or public order. Caligula's reign ended abruptly when members of the Praetorian Guard assassinated him. His uncle Claudius was declared emperor shortly after, restoring stability. Rome had survived its first true encounter with imperial unpredictability, demonstrating the resilience of its institutions and the enduring strength of its routines. Emperor Claudius, often underestimated due to his physical disabilities and quiet demeanor, proved to be an effective ruler. He expanded the empire by annexing Britain, improved the judicial system, and invested heavily in infrastructure, including new aqueducts and roads. His administrative reforms strengthened provincial governance, making the empire more integrated and efficient. After Claudius, Nero took power. His early reign, guided by experienced advisors like Seneca, was surprisingly stable. Public performances, festivals, and construction projects flourished. However, as Nero grew more self-indulgent, political tensions increased. Accusations, purges, and fears of rebellion created an atmosphere of uncertainty among the elite. Despite these issues, the empire continued to function. Grain shipments arrived from Egypt, legions guarded frontiers, and provincial cities maintained their routines. The Great Fire of Rome devastated large portions of the capital, prompting massive rebuilding efforts. New districts emerged with wider streets and improved safety measures. Nero's reign eventually collapsed after a series of revolts. He fled and took his own life, ending the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Yet the empire endured. Its vast systems, roads, laws, trade routes, and administrative networks operated with remarkable consistency, allowing Rome to weather political storms without losing its underlying stability. After Nero's death, Rome entered a brief but turbulent period known as the Year of the Four Emperors. In just a single year, for different men, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian, claimed the imperial title. Legions in various provinces proclaimed their own commanders as emperor, marching toward Italy to enforce their claims. Battles were fought in distant valleys and along river crossings, while senators in Rome tried to guess which side would prevail. For ordinary citizens, the constant change of rulers was unsettling but oddly distant. Bakers still kneaded dough in the early morning, water still flowed through aqueducts, and children still played in crowded streets. Taxes and grain distributions continued, reflecting the resilience of the imperial system. Eventually, Vespasian emerged victorious. A practical and experienced general, he restored order with deliberate calm. He repaired finances, disciplined the army, and began construction projects, including the Flavian Amphitheater, later known as the Colosseum. The chaos of rapid succession gradually faded into memory. Rome had momentarily wobbled, yet its underlying structures remained intact. The empire once again moved to a steady rhythm, guided by a leader who valued stability more than spectacle. Under Vespasian and his sons, Titus and Domitian, the Flavian dynasty consolidated imperial power. Vespasian, frugal and methodical, focused on rebuilding what civil war had damaged. He imposed careful taxes, reformed provincial administration, and ensured that the army remained loyal to the state rather than to individual commanders. The Colosseum slowly rose from the remains of Nero's former palace grounds, a massive stone structure that would host public games and spectacles. His son Titus completed the amphitheater and managed crises that could have shattered public confidence. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which buried Pompeii and Herculaneum, and a devastating fire in Rome. Relief efforts, organized with quiet efficiency, demonstrated the government's capacity to respond. Domitian, the last Flavian, strengthened frontiers and improved the pay and discipline of soldiers. Yet his increasing suspicion and authoritarian tendencies created unease among senators, eventually leading to his assassination. Despite political drama at the top, the empire remained structurally sound. Roads were maintained, trade routes stayed active, and cities across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East continued to grow. The Flavians had successfully carried Rome from the instability after Nero into a new, more organized phase. After Domitian's death, the Senate selected Nerva, an elder statesman known for moderation. His brief reign marked the beginning of what later writers would call the era of the five good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These rulers shared a key practice. They adopted competent successors rather than relying solely on bloodline. Nerva adopted Trajan, a respected general, signaling a commitment to ability over heredity. Trajan expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, conquering Dacia and securing wealth from its mines. He invested heavily in infrastructure, new roads, canals, markets, and monumental buildings like Trajan's Forum and Column. Yet for most inhabitants of the empire, these grand projects blended into ordinary life. Merchants walked beneath new arches without thinking of their symbolism. Farmers crossed newly built bridges simply because they were sturdier. The empire felt confident and secure. Law extended into remote regions, and local communities adapted Roman customs at their own pace. The combination of good administration, stable succession, and continued investment in public works created a long, tranquil plateau in Roman history, a time when the machine of empires seemed to run almost effortlessly. Trajan's conquests had stretched Rome's borders to their maximum. But his successor Hadrian understood that no empire could expand indefinitely. He chose consolidation over further growth. Traveling extensively, Hadrian visited distant provinces in person, inspecting forts, harbors, and cities. He ordered improvements wherever necessary, paying close attention to detail. In Britain, he initiated construction of Hadrian's Wall, a long, fortified barrier marking the empire's northern boundary. The wall did not seal Rome off completely. Instead, it regulated movement, concentrating trade and security at controlled crossing points. In the east, Hadrian strengthened existing defenses and fostered cultural exchange rather than new annexations. Architecturally, he left a deep mark, commissioning the rebuilding of the Pantheon and various villas, temples, and public spaces. Daily life under Hadrian remained calm. Soldiers drilled at frontier forts, townspeople attended markets, and provincial elites governed local affairs under Roman oversight. The empire learned to breathe steadily instead of constantly reaching outward. This careful management delayed future crises, giving Rome decades of relative peace in which law, infrastructure, and culture could further mature. The long period of stability under the so-called good emperors allowed Roman law to develop into a remarkably sophisticated system. Legal scholars wrote commentaries on contracts, property, family rights, and inheritance. Magistrates in cities across the empire applied these principles, adjusting them to local customs when necessary. Courts operated in predictable ways, hearing disputes between neighbors, merchants, and families. Most cases dealt not with dramatic crimes, but with ordinary disagreements, boundary lines, unpaid debts, or contested wills. This focus on routine justice helped maintain social order. People knew that grievances could be addressed through formal channels instead of private revenge. For the average inhabitant of a Roman town, law appeared in many small details: standardized weights in markets, recorded sales contracts, and written marriage agreements. In rural areas, local elders often mediated, but Roman procedures still influenced outcomes. The empire thus functioned not only through legions and governors, but through patient, daily applications of law. This quiet network of rules and judgments, largely unnoticed in grand narratives, did as much as any emperor to hold Rome together. Marcus Aurelius, often remembered as the philosopher emperor, inherited a prosperous yet increasingly pressured empire. He studied Stoic philosophy, writing reflections on duty, self-control, and the transient nature of power. His reign, however, was far from peaceful. Wars along the Danube frontier demanded constant attention, as Germanic tribes tested Rome's defenses. Marcus spent years in military camps, issuing orders, negotiating treaties, and inspecting defenses. At the same time, a serious epidemic, possibly smallpox, spread throughout the empire, killing many and weakening the population. Despite these challenges, Marcus approached governance with calm persistence. He tried to maintain justice, protect vulnerable groups, and keep administrative structures functioning. For ordinary people, the Antonine Plague meant empty seats at markets, quieter streets, and the loss of neighbors or relatives. Yet life went on. Fields were still plowed, aqueducts still maintained, and taxes still collected. Marcus's writings, composed in quiet moments during campaigns, reveal the personal strain of leadership during crisis. His attempt to remain rational and compassionate under pressure symbolized the empire's broader effort to maintain stability in a world that was gradually becoming more unpredictable. Marcus Aurelius broke with the recent practice of adopting the best possible successor by leaving power to his biological son, Commodus. Initially, hopes were high, but Commodus soon proved uninterested in the careful responsibilities of rule. He preferred spectacle, appearing in the arena as a gladiator and seeking admiration through theatrical performances. Administrative tasks were increasingly delegated to favorites and freedmen, some of whom abused their positions. Corruption rose, and trust in the government weakened. While the empire's structural systems still functioned, taxes were gathered, legions remained stationed along frontiers, and cities continued their routines. The sense of purposeful leadership faded. Assassination plots and purges created a climate of fear among elites. Eventually, Commodus himself was murdered, ending the Antonine dynasty. His death did not immediately destroy Rome, but it marked a turning point. The century that followed would be known for crises, rapid changes of rulers, and mounting pressures on the empire's borders. The smooth, almost effortless stability of earlier decades had given way to a more fragile equilibrium, one that required increasing energy to maintain. After Commodus, Rome entered a period of profound instability. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, many elevated by the army, and just as quickly removed. Civil wars flared as rival generals competed for the throne. At the same time, external threats increased. Germanic tribes pressed along the Rhine and Danube, while Persian forces challenged Roman control in the east. Provinces were invaded and sometimes temporarily lost. Cities along frontiers suffered raids, leading to destroyed homes and displaced populations. Economic strains deepened. To pay soldiers and fund defenses, emperors debased the currency, reducing the silver content of coins. Prices rose, trade became less reliable, and trust in money weakened. Yet even in this troubled era, the empire did not simply collapse. Provincial officials still administered justice, farmers still sowed and harvested, and craftsmen still produced goods. Some regions, especially those far from the main lines of conflict, experienced relative calm. The crisis was real but unevenly felt. What made this period remarkable was not only its instability, but also Rome's eventual ability to adapt, reorganize, and temporarily recover. The 3rd century emperors were often military men who spent most of their short reigns on campaign. They moved from frontier to frontier, repelling invasions and suppressing internal revolts. Their rule tended to be practical rather than ideological, focused on immediate survival of the empire. Fortifications were strengthened, local defenses reorganized, and alliances formed with neighboring tribes when useful. In some regions, such as the so-called Gallic Empire in the west and the Palmyrene realm in the east, breakaway states briefly formed, governing parts of the Roman world independently. Yet many of these splinter kingdoms still used Roman law, currency, and titles, demonstrating how deeply embedded imperial structures had become. Eventually, emperors like Aurelian reconquered lost territories, reunifying the empire. Aurelian earned the title Restorer of the World for his efforts. But the cost of continual crisis was high. Urban populations shrank, trade routes shifted, and confidence in long-term stability eroded. The empire survived, but it was no longer the confident, expansive power of the early principate. It had become a realm that lived day to day, adjusting constantly to pressure. By the late 3rd century, it was clear that the empire could no longer be effectively governed by a single ruler traveling across vast territories. Diocletian, rising from modest origins, recognized this weakness and introduced sweeping reforms. He divided imperial authority among 4 rulers, 2 senior emperors called Augusti and 2 junior emperors called Caesars, in a system known as the Tetrarchy. Each governed a different region, allowing for faster responses to local problems. Diocletian also reorganized provinces, increasing their number but reducing their size to improve administration. Taxation was standardized and made more systematic, often based on land and labor assessments. These reforms sought to create predictable revenue for the army and bureaucracy. Additionally, Diocletian attempted to stabilize the economy by issuing price edicts and currency reforms, though with mixed success. Religious policy hardened as well, culminating in persecutions of Christians, whom authorities viewed as disruptive to traditional unity. For ordinary people, these changes manifested as new officials, more regular tax collection, and increased military presence. Life became more regulated, but also more secure in some regions. Diocletian's efforts did not remove all problems, yet they gave the empire a more structured framework that would influence its later evolution. After Diocletian retired, struggles for power resumed until Constantine emerged as the dominant ruler. His reign marked a profound transformation in the empire's religious environment. In 313, he issued the Edict of Milan with his co-emperor Licinius, granting tolerance to Christians and ending official persecutions. Christianity, which had grown quietly in cities and rural communities, now operated openly. Constantine favored the religion, supporting church councils, funding basilicas, and involving bishops in imperial matters. At the Council of Nicaea, he presided over theological debates aimed at achieving unity of belief. Politically, Constantine also made a significant geographic decision. He founded a new capital at Byzantium, later renamed Constantinople. Situated on major trade routes between Europe and Asia, the city was easier to defend than Rome and closer to the empire's most active frontiers. While senatorial families in Rome maintained traditional ceremonies, Constantinople rose as a vibrant center of administration and commerce. For everyday citizens, the spread of Christianity introduced new rituals, baptisms, liturgies, and communal charity, alongside or instead of older pagan practices. The empire did not become uniformly Christian overnight, but the religious balance had clearly shifted. A new cultural framework was emerging, one that would shape the final centuries of Roman rule and the world beyond it. After Constantine, the pattern of shared rule between eastern and western halves of the empire became more established. While a single emperor occasionally managed to reunite authority, practical realities favored division. The Eastern Empire, with its wealthy cities and strong trade networks, often had more resources to defend itself. The Western Empire, facing repeated pressures along the Rhine and Danube, struggled with declining tax revenues and shrinking urban centers. Despite this divide, administrative practices remained recognizably Roman in both halves. Laws were issued in Latin, officials used familiar titles, and soldiers served in legions, even as their composition evolved to include more non-Roman recruits. In many towns, life continued much as it had for generations. Farmers worked fields, local councils oversaw civic duties, and travelers moved along ancient roads. Yet along the frontiers, large groups of Goths, Vandals, and other peoples sought entry into Roman territory, sometimes as refugees fleeing other migrating tribes. Agreements were made to settle them as federate allies, providing soldiers in exchange for land. These arrangements worked unevenly, occasionally leading to cooperation and at other times to conflict. The empire was not yet collapsing, but it was increasingly dependent on delicate compromises. One of the most consequential moments in the late empire came when large groups of Goths were allowed to cross the Danube to escape the advance of the Huns. Poor management by Roman officials led to exploitation, shortages, and unrest among the Gothic refugees. Their grievances eventually erupted into armed revolt. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Adrianople in 378, where Emperor Valens led his forces against the Goths. The Roman army suffered a disastrous defeat, and Valens himself was killed. The loss demonstrated that Rome could no longer assume battlefield superiority. Yet, even this catastrophe did not destroy the empire. Eastern authorities regrouped, negotiated settlements, and integrated many Goths into the military structure. Cities continued to function, and laws continued to be issued. Still, the psychological impact was significant. The old confidence of invincibility had been replaced by recognition that Rome now existed in a more dangerous world, where cooperation and compromise with migrating peoples were unavoidable. The empire was becoming less a rigid Roman state and more a shared space between Roman and non-Roman groups, bound together by convenience, habit, and the lingering prestige of imperial institutions. In the late Roman period, daily life blended continuity with transformation. Many cities shrank in population, but their basic structures remained: forums, baths, churches, and remnants of temples. In the countryside, villa estates persisted, though some were abandoned, while others adapted to new economic realities. Peasants worked the land under various arrangements, sometimes as tenants, sometimes as bound laborers. Christianity now shaped the rhythm of time, with weeks structured around Sunday worship and the calendar filled with saints' days and church festivals. Bishops gained influence as local leaders, often mediating between imperial authorities and communities. Latin remained the language of administration in the West, while Greek dominated the East, but both have continued to think of themselves as Roman. Even those of barbarian origin who served as soldiers or officials often adopted Roman dress, customs, and legal concepts. The empire, though pressured on many sides, still provided a framework of identity and order. People married, raised children, and worried about harvests much as their ancestors had. The great shifts of power at the top filtered into their lives only gradually, through changes in taxation, security, and religious practice. In 410, a moment occurred that would have seemed unimaginable centuries earlier. The city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths under King Alaric. After complex negotiations, broken promises, and shifting alliances, the Gothic army entered the city. There was looting, fear, and destruction, though not complete devastation. Many citizens fled, carrying what they could. Others hid in churches, which some attackers respected as sanctuaries. The symbolic impact was enormous. Writers across the empire struggled to understand how the once invincible capital could be violated. Some saw it as divine judgment, others as a reminder that all earthly powers are temporary. Yet even after this shock, Rome did not vanish. People returned, buildings were repaired, and life resumed in a quieter form. The imperial court had long since moved elsewhere, and other cities had taken over administrative functions. Rome had become more of a spiritual and historical center than a political one. The sack marked a turning point in perception more than in immediate function. It showed that the Western Empire was vulnerable, but it also revealed the resilience of communities that continued to rebuild amidst uncertainty. Through the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire existed in a state of gradual weakening. Emperors came and went, often controlled by powerful generals or court officials. Territories slipped away as Vandals established a kingdom in North Africa. Visigoths settled in Gaul and Spain, and other groups took control of Britain. Tax revenues declined as wealthy provinces were lost, making it harder to pay soldiers and maintain infrastructure. Still, elements of Roman administration persisted. Laws were issued, coins minted, and officials appointed. Many barbarian leaders sought recognition from the emperor, using Roman titles to legitimize their rule. They issued their own law codes influenced by Roman models and allowed existing local structures to continue. For ordinary inhabitants of Gaul, Spain, or Italy, the transition from Roman to barbarian rule often felt less like an abrupt collapse and more like a slow change in names at the top. Fields were still cultivated, churches remained active, and Latin continued to be spoken. The idea of Rome lingered even as the institutional reality thinned. By the late 5th century, the Western imperial court had become largely symbolic. Real power was held by military strongmen who installed and removed emperors at will. One such leader, Odoacer, deposed the young Romulus Augustulus in 476. Rather than appointing another puppet emperor, he sent the imperial insignia to the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople, acknowledging him as the sole ruler in name. This act is often used by historians as a convenient date for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Yet in the daily lives of most people, little changed overnight. Odoacer ruled Italy as king, but maintained many Roman administrative practices. The Senate still met, taxes were still collected, and Roman law continued to influence judgments. The structures of empire faded gradually rather than shattering in a single moment. What ended was not Roman culture or memory, but the existence of a Western emperor residing in Italy. The Eastern Empire, later called Byzantium, continued for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving and transforming Roman traditions in new contexts. In the East, the Roman Empire persisted, centered on Constantinople. Emperors there considered themselves fully Roman, calling their state the Roman Empire and their subjects Romans, even though they spoke mainly Greek. They maintained Roman law, taxation, and military systems, adapting them to changing circumstances. Under Justinian in the 6th century, efforts were made to reconquer parts of the lost West, including North Africa and Italy. His reign also produced one of the most important legal achievements in history, the codification of Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis. This massive collection organized centuries of statutes, opinions, and precedents into a coherent body. It would later influence legal systems across Europe and beyond. Architecturally, the East produced marvels such as the Hagia Sophia, blending Roman engineering with new artistic styles. Christianity continued to evolve, shaping doctrine, liturgy, and monastic life. While the political map changed frequently, the Eastern Empire remained a living continuation of Rome, demonstrating that the Roman story did not truly end with the events of 476. Even after political structures transformed, the influence of Rome continued to echo through centuries. Latin remained the language of scholarship, law, and church administration in the West. Roman roads guided medieval trade routes. Roman walls were reused, repaired, or built upon. Law codes in kingdoms such as the Franks incorporated Roman principles. blending them with Germanic customs. The idea of empire itself, of a single authority claiming universal rule, was deeply shaped by Roman precedent. Kings and emperors in later Europe framed their power in relation to Rome, whether by claiming to restore it or to succeed it. In architecture, arches, domes, and columns reappeared in Renaissance buildings, consciously imitating ancient models. Literary works from Virgil, Ovid, and others were copied in monasteries, preserving them for future ages. Christianity, deeply intertwined with Roman history, carried elements of Roman administration into church structures, dioceses, councils, and canon law. Thus, Rome lived on not as a single political entity, but as a collection of practices, ideas, and memories woven into the fabric of later civilizations. Standing back from the long timeline of the Roman Empire, one notices not just battles, emperors, and dramatic events, but an underlying current of ordinary life. For more than 1,000 years, people woke each morning in Roman worlds, first in small huts on the hills of Italy, later in bustling cities from Britain to Egypt, and finally in half-ruined towns and fortified villages. They cooked simple meals, worried about taxes, prayed to gods or to God, and taught their children how to survive. Empires rose, reformed, and split. Capitals shifted from Rome to Constantinople and, in a sense, to countless later centers of power. Yet the habits Rome developed, its laws, roads, administrative techniques, and ideas of citizenship, continued to guide societies long after emperors disappeared. The story of Rome is not a tale of sudden glory and sudden collapse, but of slow construction, gradual change, and lingering influence. Like a long, steady breath, it begins quietly on a few hills beside a river and extends, almost without anyone noticing in the moment, into the foundations of the modern world. When we trace this story calmly, step by careful step, we are reminded that history is not only made in dramatic moments, but also in the patient routines of countless lives, lived one ordinary day at a time. And now, as our long story comes to an end, let the last traces of the Roman world slowly dissolve into the quiet around you. The echo of distant footsteps on ancient roads, the soft murmur of markets long vanished, the faint light of oil lamps flickering behind stone walls, all of it fading gently into stillness. We have traveled from simple huts on the Palatine Hill to the marble halls of emperors, from crowded forums to silent border fortresses, from the confident early republic to the uncertain twilight of a changing world. Yet through every century, through every rise and decline, life continued in small, steady rhythms. Meals cooked, fields tended, children taught, prayers whispered in languages now forgotten. History, in the end, is not a single moment of triumph or disaster. It is a long, slow breathing of civilizations, and you have drifted through one of the greatest tonight. There is nothing left you need to do. No more battles to consider, no more emperors to remember. Only rest, only quiet, only the soft comfort of knowing the world can change slowly, gently, across centuries. So let the empire fall away now. Let the long timeline close like a book. Let your thoughts settle into calm darkness, and allow yourself to drift, peacefully, steadily, into sleep.